Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to my mid-year book review freak out book tag thing. Yes, that's it. Sorry if you can hear background noise, the window is open because yes, I'm in a cardigan in 27-degree heat, but it's fine. I'll stay hydrated with the most unaesthetic water bottle to ever exist, but it's fine. Today's going to be a chaotic video because I've done something very dramatic this morning that I haven't recovered from yet. And if you know me personally, you know that is a big step. So we'll see. But we are here to do a mid-year reading check-in. I might do a separate video for stats because I'm not that prepared to have them in this video, but I think it's really interesting to look at my stats and kind of like reset for the second half of the year. So I might do a stats mid-year video soon or not. Let me know if you would like one down in the comments. But today we're here to answer the classic questions that everyone answers every year in the middle of the year, reviewing all the books that you've read. So there's not much of an introduction. Let's just hop straight into the toughest question always, but always the first one. What is the best book you've read so far this year? Oh my gilly gosh. I've had a good reading year in terms of I feel like I finally found my reading groove. I found my routine that works for me in terms of how much I can read, and I'm really kind of emphasizing that and kind of really allowing reading to be a priority again in my life, having kind of had a chaotic end last year as well as the beginning of this year. I finally found my reading groove again and kind of a routine that works for me. I have read a couple of 5 stars and it's a tough choice between a book that I have literally just finished and some standouts for the books I have read so far. But I do think, if you've been following my channel for a while, the best book I've read so far this year, that one that brought me so much joy, I wasn't expecting much from, but it ended up being one of my favourite books, is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I absolutely adored this book when I read it via audiobook, so much so I had to go out and buy a physical copy of it myself, just so I had it in my possession physically. And I thought this book was incredible. I feel like I've raved about it quite a lot on my channel, and I feel like I've made a lot of people read it so far this year. So if you've also enjoyed it, yay, congrats for liking one of my favourite books. This book basically follows our main character, Florence Day. She is a ghostwriter for one of the most iconic romance writers out in this fictional world that this book is set in. It is an extension for her next kind of book release, but a new editor is kind of put on her and he won't give her an extension. So she goes back home, ends up having to go back to her family's home because of a family emergency, and then the next thing she knows, the editor that she's just met who wouldn't extend her deadline has rocked up at her family's funeral home as a ghost. And it's a ghost love story from then on out. And the family dynamic, the whole plot, the romance, the ending, oh, it was so good. Absolutely love this book. So excited to reread it, hopefully by the end of this year, which is a spoiler for one of the questions later on in this video. So definitely, it's so tight, but best book I've read so far this year. 2 honourable mentions though, just very, very quickly. Girlfriends by Holly Bourne, a book that once again surprised me, wasn't expecting to be 5 stars from, ended up being 5 stars. A beautiful story about female friendship and how different seasons in your life kind of depend on which friends you need, and kind of rekindling friendships over a long period of time, as also well as like the toxic side of friendships as well. This book was a beautiful exploration of that, and highly, highly recommend it if you can deal with some of the trigger warnings like rape, sexual assault, drug abuse and miscarriages. And then finally, another honourable mention, because I can never answer these questions with just one book, is Love and Other Scams by PJ Ellis, which I've just read as an audiobook, and oh my god, it was incredible, 5 stars. Oh, it was so good, I can't not mention it. It's basically a rom-com with a diamond heist involved. That's all I'll say, because I've been talking about it a lot on my weekly vlog that is coming this Tuesday. So make sure, if you want to hear my thoughts, make sure you watch that video that's coming out on Tuesday. So those are the 3 best books I've read so far this year. I'm really hoping I can get some more 5 stars in by the end of the year, because I really haven't given out many. I've given out a lot of 4 and 4.5s, but I haven't given out many 5s. So I'm really hoping the next half of the year kind of brings me some more joys like The Dead Romantics, Girlfriends and Love and Other Scams. The next question is the best sequel I've read so far this year, and I don't read many sequels or series, so it was a very, very easy pick. Another one, 5 stars actually, but not a standalone, so which is why I have put it into this position, because it's a second book in a series that I finished this year. I started in the year of 2021 and I finished it this year, and that is the Curse So Dark and Lonely series, with A Heart So Fierce and Broken taking this spot for the best sequel I've read so far this year. I just loved how this book followed an entire adventure across the lands. So you kind of never stayed in one spot. I loved the constant intrigue and the journey that the characters went on. I loved the friendships. I loved the fact that this book didn't follow the main character of the first book, yet stood so independently and written so well for a second book in the series that wasn't following the main character. And obviously I loved the romance that was blooming in this book as well, and just an amazing sequel. And I ended up giving A Curse So Dark and Lonely a 4.5, A Heart So Fierce and Broken a whopping 5, and A Vow So Bold and Deadly, which is the last book in the series, a 4. So a really good standout series for me, especially because it's a fantasy. If you guys know me, you know I'm predominantly a contemporary and romance reader, so getting a fantasy series I absolutely love is hard come by. Not that I read many, but yeah, definitely a highlight of my reading year. Absolutely devoured this book in 24 hours. It was joyous to read. The next question is a favourite reread that you've read so far this year. I did a whole vlog of rereading some books that were 4 or 4.5s, just to kind of see how I felt a couple of years on from reading and rating them originally. And from that video I found and remembered an absolute gem, and that is Head Over Heels by Hannah Orenstein. I gave this book 5 stars back when I first read it in 2020, I want to say. This is a gymnastics romance, and if you guys know me, I love a bit of gymnastics. I used to do gymnastics myself, not for very long, but I absolutely loved it and wished I could still do it, but health reasons prevent me. So I just kind of fuel my love of gymnastics by watching gymnastics on TV and reading gymnastics romances, and this is definitely up there as one of the best. I haven't read any other ones, but this one's so good. This book basically follows our main character Avery, who was an up-and-coming Olympic gymnast. Unfortunately, she had to pull out at the last minute at the 2012 Olympic Games because of a freak accident. So her kind of entire dreams and the entire life that she's built up and created around herself kind of comes crashing down, and she ends up just kind of completely moving to the other side of the country to kind of try and start afresh, and she ends up dating this person. And then 9 years later she breaks up with him, and the only option is to move back home to the place where her dreams got crushed. And then she ends up coaching a budding Olympic gymnast, and kind of her love for gymnastics comes back, and there's a romance with the other coach. And this book definitely follows some serious topics. It follows a fictionalized version of the NASA trials, but rereading this book was so heartwarming and so joyous, and it really did reignite my love for this book. And I just feel like I need to spoon feed a lot of people into reading this, because I feel like it's not as well known as it needs to be. If you can deal with the trigger warnings of sexual assault and kind of a fictionalized version of the sexual assault trials that happened in American gymnastics a couple of years ago, I highly recommend checking out this book. We're flying through these because I'm filming on my lunch break and I'm running out of time. What is a genre you've been reading / loving the most this year? I don't divert away from genres very often. I always predominantly read contemporary and romances. I definitely feel like I'm slowly moving into more of like the steamy romances. Not complete overboard. I don't read like proper smut, but I'm definitely kind of veering on from like the timid romances of like Lindsay Kelk and Giovanna Fletcher into more of like the steamier romances like The Fine Print of Laura and Asher. I can't remember what other steamy books I've read, but I've definitely been kind of venturing more into like the steamy side of romance. Loving it for sure. Need some more recommendations, but yeah, that's definitely the genre that I've been gravitating towards. But I just think I will always stay consistent with contemporary and romances. I read a few I read a few thrillers this year as well. Some that I absolutely loved is The King is Dead by Benjamin Dean. Five Survive was a really good audiobook by Holly Jackson, which was her newest release. So I do kind of pick and choose some of the other genres that I like to read, such as fantasy and thriller, but my predominant ones are definitely romance and contemporaries, and will always stay that way, I feel. The next question is, what are some new releases that you haven't got to yet but would like to? And I have a little stack here of 3 that I think are definitely kind of top priority. They are all from my most recent kind of birthday book haul / come shopping with me. The first one is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I don't think I need to go into this, but this is a satire look on the publishing industry. When a published author dies, their best friend decides to take their most recent manuscript and publish it under their name, and it kind of has a conversation about the entire kind of publishing industry and what's wrong with it. And Everyone's reading it. I feel like I need to read it. This is a great way for me to experience R.F. Kuang's writing style, because I know everyone loves like the Poppy War and Babel, and obviously I don't read fantasy. I definitely do not read high fantasy. So I think this is a great opportunity for me to experience the wonder of R.F. Kuang without having to get my teeth into a high fantasy book. So I definitely want to read this before the end of the year. I would also love to read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez by the end of the year, because everyone once again is raving about it, and this one kind of really hits home for me because it has a side plot of a kidney donor and a kidney transplant waiting list and all the annoyingly interesting things that come along with that. If you don't know, I've had a kidney transplant myself. I was on the waiting list. I got a donor from my dad, very gratefully. So I've gone through the whole process. So I'm really interested to see how Abby Jimenez touches this topic, and whether it's too fictionalized, whether it's a really kind of eye-opening experience and it's very kind of true to what the experience is actually like. I'm really interested, so I'd love to get to this by the end of the year. And just as a fun one, I would love to get to 7X's by Lucy Vine by the end of the year, just because I have heard good things about this book from people that I really trust, and it sounds absolutely right up my street. It's a rom-com about a main character who is kind of done with relationships, and she's rereading a magazine from the noughties one day, the early 2000s, and it says that by your 7th relationship you should have already met the one, and she realizes that is her. She's had 7 exes, so she goes back and rekindles something with every ex to see if she's missed something with them, whether one of those is the one. And I just think it sounds like such a fun time, so I definitely want to get to this hopefully by the end of summer, not just the end of the year. Next question is, what are some anticipated releases that haven't come out yet that you'd like to read? I don't have any. I don't tend to keep up with new releases unless they are from authors that I already know and love. And I feel like all my favourite authors have already released books this year, so I don't have any more anticipated releases. My anticipated releases were Love Struck by Laura Jane Williams, that has just come out, Love Me Do by Lindsay Kelk, which comes out July 20th, which I have gratefully already read thanks to Harper Fiction. How to Die Famous by Benjamin Dean is a book that has already come out, I just haven't read it yet. So I just feel like there aren't any, because I don't get excited for new releases unless they are already like authors I know and love. So I don't have an answer for this question. But those are some of the new releases that I was excited for, but they now have already come out and are in my possession, ready to read. Another one is The Do's and Donuts of Love by Adiba Jagira, who is the author of Hanu Nash's Guide to Fake Dating, which I loved. I brought recently because it just came out and I've read it, and it sadly was a little bit of a disappointment for me. So those are some of the anticipated releases that I've had, but are no longer anticipated because they have been released. The next question is the most disappointing book you've read so far this year, and this one was a very, very easy one for me, and that's The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I read this book because everyone was like, oh my god, you're gonna love it. Everyone was raving about it, but like everyone told me I was gonna love it because it's a Disney kind of based romance, and I am a massive Disney fan, if you didn't know. So I was like, oh my god, this is like the romance for me. Another steamy romance book, by the way, if I didn't say. And I thought it was going to be 5 stars, and it just wasn't. It was just so fine. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was just something that I didn't really enjoy. The romance was cute, but it felt way too rushed for me. I didn't like the fact that the author didn't... It was a fictionalized Disneyland, yes, but every real life thing that she featured and spoke about regarding Disney was based upon Disney World. The book said Disneyland was celebrating its 50th anniversary. It's not. Disney World was celebrating its 50th anniversary from 2021 to 2022, which is now finished. It's set in, it was located in Florida, which Disneyland is set in California. Disney World is in Florida. So those were the 2 kind of major things to me that just kind of showed the author didn't do her research. And I know it was Dreamland and it was basically just the name, but having Dreamland, you are going to associate it to Disneyland, and it wasn't what she was basing it on. She was basing it on Disney World. So I know that's such a petty thing to not like the book on, but that was just kind of like, I just never really felt connected to characters. I didn't really like the plot. I didn't like the 6-month kind of timeline. It was a cute romance, but I have forgotten about it already, and it just was a major disappointment because I was like, romance, Disney, yes, give it to me. Make it 5 stars, and it just wasn't. So yeah, sadly, not a 5 star. On to happier terms, what are the biggest surprises that you've had so far this year? For me, definitely it was Grown by Tiffany J. Jackson. I've been wanting to read this book for years. Emily kindly gifted it to me for Christmas this year or last year, I can't remember. Finally got around to it. I think it was this year actually, because I just got it, moved in and read it straight away. And it truly took me by surprise. I absolutely adored it. Another one of my 5 stars of this year. I just thought it was a really well done story for a YA. This book basically follows our main character, I hate character names, Enchanted, who is an aspiring singer, and she goes to a audition one day for her favourite kind of art, and I don't know whether it's some sort of competition to get a mentorship by him, but Enchanted really kind of catches this artist's eye, and then they start to do a mentorship with each other, like independently, one-on-one, and things start to evolve in a very uncomfortable way. This book kind of really focuses on triggering topics like predators and kind of sexual abuse and emotional abuse and kind of like verbal abuse in like the music industry. And I thought it was a really captivating read. Yes, a hard one to read, but a really, really fascinating one and a very well written one as well. So I really, really enjoyed that one, gave it 5 stars. It was my first 5-star of 2023. So that one definitely took me by surprise because I was expecting to enjoy it, but not that much. Another one that took me by surprise was The Girl with Aladdin Voice by Abby Dare. This has been on my bookshelf for absolute years, and I finally got around to reading it in June, and I was always intimidated by it because of the writing style. This book basically follows our main character Dundee, who lives in a very, very small town in Nigeria, and in that town it's very common for little girls to get shipped off as bride money and get married in to another family in exchange for money for their family. And Dundee, it's a bit fluff, Dundee unfortunately has to deal with this, and she gets shipped off and gets married to a much older man who already has 3 wives. But the reason she gets married to him is because he finally wants a son, and he believes Dundee is going to give him his first son. Dundee doesn't want any of this because she wants an education, and so she runs away from this situation to try and better her life for herself. And I just thought that this book was going to be so intimidating, like a book that kind of completely went over my head, but this book was so addicting and very, very captivating. This book kind of has a mystery involved in it as well. I don't want to say more than that because I went into it completely unknown and unfamiliar with the fact that it had a mystery involved at all. I thought it was just like your standard contemporary, but it wasn't as much more than that, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's going to be a book that stays with me for quite a while. And then finally, a book that I've already mentioned, another one that took me by surprise, was Love and Other Scams by PJ Ellis, just because I just truly wasn't expecting it to be 5 stars, and it was just so much fun to listen to that I highly, highly recommend it, and it definitely, definitely is one of my biggest surprises of the year. Next one is favourite author, and I feel like I haven't really ventured out into new author territory this year. I feel like I've read a lot of books by authors that I already know and love this year, which is an interesting kind of thing to notice upon. But one author that I have just mentioned, and I will mention again because I read another book of hers after reading Grown, is Tiffany J. Jackson. I read Monday's Not Coming as an audiobook a couple of months after having read Grown, and I really enjoyed that one as well. I gave it 4 stars. So I do think if I read other works from Tiffany Jackson and they are still kind of 4 to 5 stars, she could become one of my favourite authors. So just a little shout out to Tiffany J. Jackson because I have really enjoyed both of the books I've read from her this year, and she is a new author for me this year as well. Next one is a book that made you cry, and surprisingly, Happy Place by Emily Henry. The ending definitely got me a little bit teary. This book, I did a whole reading vlog about it, so I won't go too much into it, but I wasn't expecting to love this book at all because I hated beach read, but this book has some sort of fake dating situation in it, so I thought I'd give it a go and see whether this fake dating trope could really allow myself to enjoy an Emily Henry book, and I did really enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars, but the ending did kind of I felt really connected to the characters by that point, and I just wanted the ending to kind of go the way I hoped, and it did make me tear up a little bit. I have vlog footage of me reading the ending, so I'll definitely link that video up above and down below. But another book that made me cry is also The Dead Romantics. I listened to this as an audiobook, like I said, and I had to wipe tears away when I was reading the last couple of listening to the last couple of chapters, should I say, in the car on my commute home, because it was, I think I was crying more of happiness more so than sad. So both of these books for this answer are kind of happy tears, but even still, they were tears nevertheless. More onto a, like, not really happier note, because like I just said, they were happy tears, but a book that made you happy this year. I'm gonna have to go for The Party Crasher by Sophie Kinsella. This is my first ever Sophie Kinsella book, and it just brought a massive smile to my face. The things that Effie, our main character, got up to and the sticky situation she got herself in, I couldn't help but smile when I was reading this book. This basically follows our main character Effie, whose family is selling her childhood family home. So they have a house calling party, which is basically like the reverse of a housewarming. It's kind of like a send-off party for this house. However, Effie doesn't get invited because she doesn't get on with her dad's new girlfriend, her stepmom, so she doesn't end up getting invited. So she ends up having to sneak into this house calling party, and she has to like hide in closets and hide in chests and hide under the table, and it was just a really fun book. Like, not so over the top you're like, oh my god, this is stupid, but like the perfect balance of stupidness and silliness in this book that just kind of made for a really fun read. So yeah, definitely a book that made me happy this year. The next question is, what's the most beautiful book that you've received this year? I definitely would have to go for Grown. I think this is an absolutely stunning cover. I don't think the hardback's anything to, no, nothing to write home about, the hardback, but the cover, dust jacket, is stunning. I also really like lighting, come back. I also really like the cover of Yellowface. I think the subtlety of it is stunning. It's a perfectly bright yellow colour. It's not too green. That's the graphic designer coming out of me. It's not too green, it's not too blue. It's like the perfect yellow. But what I love most about this cover is the hardback. The spot UV gloss of the eyes and then the spine, stunning. I cannot wait to read this book. So I do think the most beautiful book I've received this year. I bought it myself, and obviously received wise as terms of a gift, Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. And the final question is, what are some books you would love to get to by the end of the year? Such an open-ended question for a bookworm and person who spends their entire life reading books, but I'm going to run off a few that have been on my TBR for so long. I remember making a video in 2020 when I first started my channel. It was coming up to the end of the year and I was making loads of end of year videos, and I had a video called Books I Wish I Read This Year and Haven't Made Time to Read. And on that book list in 2020, yeah, so 3 years ago, so if I don't read this book by the end of this year, I don't know what I'm playing at. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I still haven't read this book. Like, what is wrong with me? I've had this book since 2020 and every year I say I'm going to read it. I still haven't read it. I tried reading it last year, but last year for reading was a write-off, especially at the end of the year. And my life just completely flipped upside down, having moved out and owning my own home, and very quickly. So I tried reading this, but I was kind of in a slump, so I didn't get that far into it. I knew at the time it was a me situation and not the book, so I held on to it, obviously, and I'm hoping I can get to it by the end of the year. If I don't, I need someone to just like read it with me so I have accountability. So if you haven't read this and would like to buddy read with me, let me know in the comments down below, because I think I need some accountability. Some other ones I would love to get to by the end of the year, because it's also been on my TBR for absolute ages, and I was actually kind of thinking of unhauling it before reading it, but then someone, I can't remember your name so I'm sorry, commented on my video being like, it was actually a really good book. So I feel like this might be the perfect encapsulation of my channel, of a book that you guys have never heard of, a book that I've never heard of, but it's still really good, so I can start recommending it because it's unknown to BookTube, and that is Have You Seen My Sex Life by Kristen Bailey. This is a very mundane book. I think it's kind of more like a rom-com about a mother who kind of gets really stuck in her way. She kind of loses her self-identity when becoming a mother, and it says, it's normal for your washing machine to get more action than you, right? So I was going to unhaul it without reading it, and then someone commented saying that I should give it a go, so I've held on to it. Hopefully I can get to it by the end of the year. And one that I started at the end of the year and I need to get finished is Matthew Perry's memoir. I was absolutely loving this book, but I just, moving out kind of when everything went out the window, so I just never got around to finishing it. I need to finish it. I really want to. Aww. That's inside the book. Along with my first ever JLS concert ticket. Side note, so I need to get to this book by the end of this year, because I am this far into it. I think at this point, 6 months in, I feel like I need to start from the beginning. So hopefully I can read this by the end of the year as well. And then finally, a very new book that's come into my possession very recently, which you will see my excitement of when you see my weekly reading vlog this coming Tuesday is How to Die Famous by Benjamin Dean. This is his latest YA murder mystery. He released The King is Dead last year, which I just read this year and gave 4 stars. So I cannot wait to read this one. I will save the surprise for my weekly reading vlog, but this book is now very, very special to me, so I want to read this by the end of the year as well. Those are all the questions. I think that's the quickest I've ever done a mid-year book freakout tag, not gonna lie. That's what happens when the time is against you. Let me know in the comments what your favourite book of the year is. What's your biggest surprise? What's your biggest disappointment? And what are you looking forward to reading by the end of the year? Those are the 4 questions I would like you to answer in the comments down below. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up and subscribe down below to see future content from me. I do anything from monthly TBRs, monthly wrap-ups, weekly reading vlogs. I have now dedicated myself to doing a weekly reading vlog from now until December. So if you want any constant updates on my reading, then my weekly reading vlogs are going to be where it's at. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of those. And without further ado, I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.